Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Planning Board meeting of November 6, 2019. I'd like to introduce our members first. Stephanie Slish to my left, and
Jimmy Tarr?
Jimmy Tarr to my right, and Wilma Davis, our very important administrative assistant. And I'm Michael Poshek, and I am filling in for Bob Wagner this evening as chair. So we have some presentations this evening. We don't really have any formal hearings. We're going to start this evening with Mr. Jeff Lacy. He's going to do a presentation on natural resource zoning protection. So Mr. Lacy, when you're ready.
Sure.
Could we shut one of the doors or something?
I think maybe both of them.
Or both, yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you.
Sure. So a number of months back, maybe it was over the summer or probably around the time of your town meeting, my colleague Bob Ritchie, who's an attorney, and I were consulted about this draft bylaw that Pioneer Valley Planning Commission had drafted up for you.
Yep.
The open space development bylaw.
Yep.
And we were just asked to review it. And we reviewed it. You have it. I have not handed out my marked up version of it.
Okay.
Because I'm just not sure how useful it would be to just pick through this bylaw. But Bob's and my conclusion was that this shouldn't go to a town meeting. It shouldn't go to any town meeting. That it had some internal contradictions. There are parts of it that would be very difficult to figure out what it meant, conflicting
Yes.
aspects. It was unclear whether this was an optional or mandatory approach. It was unclear whether this was based on a sort of a cluster model or a natural resource protection zoning model. It seemed to have lots of both kind of dumped into a big soup.
Yes.
It was unclear whether you were intending to have more, less, or the same number of dwelling units that would otherwise be possible in a conventional subdivision. That was not clear. And it's overly long. It was 18 or 19 pages. These things really need to be about 9, 10 pages long. I've drafted many of them, and 19 pages is too much. So the town put the brakes on, pulled it off the town meeting floor, and I've been talking with the planning board since about coming in and working with PVPC, not only on Hatfield's bylaw, but on developing a model for them. Because I think they want a natural resource protection zoning model, because that's now the state's model, and it's kind of catching on as the latest approach to how to handle resource protection. So
Within subdivision.
you can do it outside a subdivision, but it's mandatory for subdivision.
Yeah.
It's the required approach for subdivision. The way
Okay.
it's being handled so far.
And the they you're talking about is a PVPC?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right, that's your regional planning
Okay. Yep.
commission. So they're interested in getting a good working model out of this, and Hatfield is probably interested in finding something that you could take to town meeting. And,
Yes.
be confident about. So anyway, that was the basis on which I was hired to work with you. I'm not sure to what extent you'll have me, how much I'll do, but I know I'm here tonight, and I've researched your town zoning. I've researched this bylaw. I actually sent a bylaw to you folks today. This is I was in Barry last night doing the same kind of work, and this is what this is where I'm at with Barry. And in reading it, this is probably the sixth one of these I've written, and I kept thinking, well, how would this work for Hatfield? And the answer kept coming up, well, this wouldn't be bad for Hatfield. Maybe Hatfield should look at this. It's only 10 pages.
Can you explain why you think Barry would be comparable to Hatfield in their needs and wants for something like this?
Lots of farmland they want to protect.
Okay.
Some of the other towns that I've worked in are forested towns, hilly forested towns, so they're a little different. But Barry is like you in that it has lots of wide open spaces and working farms. And
Easy to develop?
not the soil you have. They don't have, they're up in the air. They don't have the soil you have, but they do have a lot of open land, which is always easy to develop. So anyway, I put this one out today for you folks to look at, and if we go forward together, perhaps we could use this as something as a starting point.
And have you worked with Pioneer Valley Planning Commission at all on this, or are they aware of your natural resource protection zoning work that you've been doing?
They are, and apparently someone who I've been told no longer works there developed a model. And they used that model with you folks. And that we all agree that model needs to be worked over. Needs to decide whether it's cluster or whether it's natural resource protection zoning, and get the contradictions out of it and be a lot clearer about what's going on.
And that was the main difference, is that it wasn't clear enough in trying to cover too many bases, I guess, or how would you describe that?
And the submission requirements were fairly onerous on an applicant or a landowner. Probably, if it was going to be optional, the submission requirements were so onerous, probably no landowner would select it.
It's currently a version of that is optional, and out of all the subdivisions that we've had, only one has actually pursued the optional portion of that. So that was the thought process of making it mandatory or the standard for any sort of subdivision, is because it probably was too onerous for people to opt into it.
Yep. But if you make it mandatory, which all the ones that I've worked on are mandatory, there needs to be things in there that are attractive to landowners and developers. Just because it's mandatory doesn't mean you can throw the kitchen sink at these people, because then you may not ever get it passed at town meeting.
You mean the bylaw, not necessarily the subdivision?
Right. If it just looks untenable, too hard to use, too demanding, it may not pass. Your large landowners may object to what you're doing. So what we try to build into the NRPZ bylaws are things that are really attractive to landowners. Savings in infrastructure costs, design flexibility, different types of housing types, no frontage requirements, elimination of a lot of the side setback requirements, use of shared driveways. So things that just make building what you get to build a lot easier than a full-blown conventional subdivision, which I guess is $200 a foot of roadway to go in. So this takes away some of those costs. It generally takes away some of the units, so you get less of a unit count in the end, and a lot more open space, but the costs go down. So those are sort of the trade-offs, and some of that I'll show you here.
And just to differentiate, so what Pioneer Valley Planning Commission and what we considered voting at town meeting but then was pulled was more of an open space development bylaw, and this is the language of natural resource protection zoning. Could you explain a little bit the differences between those?
The slideshow will do that. In a nutshell, there's kind of, in the beginning there was in the beginning there was conventional zoning, which is just everything gets divided up into lots and streets.
Your traditional subdivision.
Right. And then along came cluster. And what cluster did was take those same number of lots and condense them into somewhat less street frontage, and then try to preserve what was left. Often those designs, while better, didn't really achieve natural resource protection. They achieved protection of open space amenities, linear aspects, wetlands, streams, some aspects, but not whole-scale agricultural preservation or forestry preservation. After that came OSRD, Open Space Residential Design, which was a deviation on cluster. And that was designed by my old boss, Randall Arendt, who I worked for 30 years ago. That's his method. It's a very good method. It works, but it's still a cluster. It's still the same number of units, cockroached onto the same parcel, and preserving what's left.
Which would arguably be good for landowners, right? Trying to expend their value out of the property.
Yep. If they get the same number of units. In most cases, it'll make for a better subdivision. It's an improvement. But it wasn't really preserving usable agricultural land, usable forestry land, meaningful blocks of habitat. And that's why in 2008 we went to the natural resource protection zoning. We first passed it in my town of Shutesbury. And we worked on it for 4 years and then passed it in 2008. And then we've been passing them in other towns since then.
Okay.
And the goal here is you put this zoning where you really want to protect the natural resources. You can't say no houses, that doesn't work. You have to have some houses. But you have less houses than under cluster and conventional. And you give an awful lot in terms of flexibility and infrastructure savings and things like that to kind of make up for the loss of those units. But you do get the protection.
Okay. And sorry, before we get into the presentation, how would a landowner think that that's a better deal if they're compared to the cluster housing when they still have the same number of units but maybe aren't preserving certain amounts of
Well, it seems like they won't have to build a
valuable
road.
land, right? Versus what you're saying is technically better for the natural resources, for preserving more valuable tracts of agricultural land, for example, in this town, but you don't get the same number of units.
Well, slide 25, I think, has that.
We can get there.
Has that on it. But I will say in all the towns I've worked in on this so far, it is passed with, well, in some cases unanimously, and in a lot of cases 90% to 10%, and with landowner support, with large landowner support, once they find out about it.
Okay.
Once they learn of how easy it is to navigate, they support it so far.
Okay, let's
Let's see it.
Okay, if we could just down the lights a tad.
Right behind you.
Okay, there we go. Okay, first slide just is from our area. It's from South Deerfield, and it's an ad for a couple of acres of a building lot. Obviously, good farmland. It says 2.27 acre open building lot with mountain view, formerly rich farmland in 5 College area. You probably see this alongside your roadsides here and there. We all do in the Pioneer Valley. Some towns, to address the issue of losing farmland and forest land, simply upzone. They increase the size of their road frontage and their lots. This is 3-acre zoning out in Hardwick, Mass. Mm-hmm. So the houses are all spread out, but it really just means the lawns get bigger.
Right.
There's nothing else going on except for streets, lawns, and houses. I grew up in this town in upstate New York, and this used to be a horse farm that I worked on when I was a kid. And it was in an area of town that they decided was conservation. So this is 5-acre zoning. Wow. And the lots were long and thin, and it had lots of land, but it was too big to mow and too small to plow. It really wasn't. There were no more horses and no more agriculture, just huge estate lots. And this is in that same town and in an area that's zoned for conservation, but you can see all the little white rectangles are the houses that have been put in all over the place, kind of gobbling up the landscape in 5-acre chunks. This is an example of cluster zoning. I wrote the bylaw back in the early 90s that created this, this project in Central Mass. And it's the same number of houses, just compressed onto the buildable land. Small portions of usable land, as you see in the front, are left over. But most of this project, this is that same project. Most of this project are thin strips of land that follow water courses, and little strips here and there. What you were looking at before was just kind of right down in this direction. Here are a couple more water courses. So 1, 2, 3, 4, really 5 pieces of open space, none of which are suitable for any kind of dairy farm activity, which is what was occurring on this parcel before. So that's cluster, and it's a better subdivision, but there's no farming. Cluster can be quite nice, especially in a suburban and a little more urban setting. This is Dana Woods in Belchertown. And smaller, more affordable, moderate-priced homes clustered around a common, 2 or 3 acre common, where all the kids play and everybody has a good time. It's a very pleasant setting, but it's not wildlife habitat, it's not forestry, it's not agriculture, it's kind of a residential amenity. Again, a better subdivision because it's a cluster.
You're saying better subdivision because it's more compact?
It's a better subdivision than conventional.
Uses
Because
less land.
that whole internal area is not just more houses.
Right.
It's a nice
Common
place
space, so to
that
speak.
everybody there can
Right.
use. And you know, you can kick your kids out of those houses and let them tear around in there, and you know where they are, and at least they're outside.
Mm-hmm.
So just go over, before we go much further on NRPZ, we do have a conservation-friendly zoning toolkit that we have bylaws for, and some of those are natural resource protection zoning is the principal one, transfer of development rights, flexible frontage, which I can talk about later, growth areas within a community. You can't preserve everything. You have to grow somewhere. Home occupations, which is an alternative to the typical commercial and industrial zoning that we see. In my town, almost all the economic activity is our home occupations. Accessory apartments, it's a way to create additional living units without creating new lots, new curb cuts. You put them in or adjacent to existing single-family dwellings.
We just passed that at our recent town meeting, yeah.
Yeah, they work very well. And then all kinds of ways to preserve the working landscape, help your farmers, avoid nuisance complaints and things like that, and just make working the land a lot easier in a community.
When you say we, you're saying like we have these toolkits. Who is we? Are you talking about?
Well, my business is Rural Planning Associates,
Okay.
and it's me and my associates,
Okay.
whoever they might be at any given moment. So this is natural resource protection zoning, and here's its pedigree. It really derives from 3 different things: from cluster zoning, because there is permanent conservation land in the end. That's one thing that cluster has. Large lot zoning, because it is very low density. It doesn't do low density by just having large lots. It's actually low density small lot zoning, if you can imagine that. And then the methodology is called fixed area ratio zoning, and we borrowed this from Pennsylvania. We borrowed some of these techniques from Maryland and Pennsylvania. And that means to determine a lot of what you need to know, you use an area-based formula. And we'll get into that a little bit. But the common elements of NRPZ are, it's by right, so you submit a subdivision plan. You could say it's mandatory. A little more forgiving way to say is it's by right. But it's the only thing you can do by right. Deviations, including conventional development alternatives, are by special permit only. So if you have what you feel is a better idea that would otherwise be prohibited by the bylaw, you can propose a deviation. And that deviation could go all the way to a conventional development. But there are some standards. You have to prove that it's going to accomplish the goals of the zoning as well as an open space design. Very low density for Massachusetts. Development rights are all calculated by formula, as we'll see. Substantial open space preservation, 65 to 90%, depending. Conservation analysis and findings process, talk about that later. That's a way to figure out where the development goes and where the preserved areas are. Greater design flexibility in the developed areas. Diversity of housing types. In Shutesbury, we allow all the different housing types that we allow. Anything from an accessory apartment to a single family to a duplex, 3-family, 4-family. You can put any of those in an open space design. Shared driveways, that eliminates the need to build so much road to create a lot of frontage. And earn density bonus options for doing things that the town believes is desirable, like creating some affordable units or public access to the open space. And then finally, in Shutesbury anyway, there's a TDR, Transfer of Development Rights option, which lets you preserve other parcels that might not be contiguous with this one and import the development rights into the project. Okay, so here's first example. We call this the 100-acre wood. This is modeled after a piece of land in New Salem. You can see the, oh, look at that, my cursor. You can see my cursor, cool. So there's the town road up along the top. There's already been some houses developed, A&R lots up here. The house that goes with the property is that one. There's a field. There's another house that's separate here. There's some undeveloped road frontage. Down below, in the lower part of the parcel, there's a large wetland with a stream running through it. Middle part of the parcel is steep. There's a recreational trail, short trail that runs through it and comes out into the field. And this is basically almost 100 acres of forest, intact forest block. So conventional development might look something like that under New Salem's old zoning. It was before they passed NRPZ. This would have been, oop, get back. Oh, going the wrong way. That would have been 34 units on 2 to 3 acre lots with a large stretch of road coming in here, going down, and then punching back out.
And the center section there, that's, yes, is that too steep to develop?
too steep to develop, but the lot lines all go in there.
Oh, okay, I
That's
see.
that's
I
all-
see what you're saying, sure.
Yeah, that's all divided up into private ownership, but it's too steep to develop.
Uh-huh. And was there an advantage to those building lots to go into that area?
Well, that's just the way conventional subdivision works.
Okay.
You don't preserve really any of it. Or
Right.
Yeah, you just cut it all up, and what's buildable, you put the houses on, and what's not just becomes part of the lot.
Okay.
Like the lots all extend down here like this, cutting through this
Right.
as well. So the whole piece, even this is technically open space, this is technically open space, but it's all fragmented into
Right.
different ownership. So makes cohesive management just about impossible. So the NRPZ version of this, this one we showed 14 units. Actually, the way it turned out when they passed it, it would have been about 20. So from 34 down to 20. But this is the 14 version. Small amount of new road that comes in here like this. So much less roadway constructed. So these houses front on this road. There's no curb cuts over here. And then there's a cul-de-sac that runs back through here. Most of these houses get their frontage off of that. Then I believe there's one shared driveway that serves two at the back there. So only one shared driveway in this project. The field is kept open. Only one curb cut along this undisturbed frontage. All development is a long ways from wetlands. The steep area, again, is undisturbed. The trail remains. And there's still a large enough block to actively manage for forest land. And one option would be for this original owner to retain the ownership of this back piece after doing this project and continue to manage that land. Or, as is often occurs, there could be a homeowners association consisting of these homeowners that would own an equal undivided share in the larger piece and then manage that. So quite a few different options. This is a 60-acre piece in Wendell, Mass. Let's make a cursor. There's the public roadway down here. No real wetlands on here, fairly flat, pretty developable piece of land.
What was the current use of that property? I'm just curious because
Just forestry?
because a lot of it is agricultural here, which is a little different than the forestry examples. So
Yep.
Right. Till you get up on the hill, we don't have that much forestry left.
Yeah. So this would be the conventional alternative. Oops, I did it again. Conventional alternative. In this scenario, they buy an additional piece to connect it back to the town road. That often happens. You can see they only really have they only really have connection here. So they buy a piece here. Sorry. And punch back out to the road. So they're putting in a large subdivision, large looping subdivision road. I think this is 18. I think they counted up 18 large lots. Again, no open space. It's all cut up. And the open space alternative to this has only one road that comes in here, swings around a small common. Most of the houses get their connection onto this road. There's a shared driveway in the back here that serves two. There's another shared driveway that extends out this way and serves three. And again, there are no frontage requirements, just legal access to either a shared driveway or a newly constructed subdivision roadway. So, the 200 or 300 foot requirement for a lot is done away with.
I have a question.
Sure.
In your experience, what has been the difference in the cost of a building lot in both methods, the conventional versus this other new method?
The cost of a building lot, you mean how much it's going to sell for?
Yeah.
Good question. The only research that I know of that's been done was done by me about 30 years ago in Amherst for my master's thesis. And I went into the assessor's office and studied a conventional subdivision in Amherst and an open space subdivision, a cluster subdivision with the lots that were half the size, but with nicely arranged open space, and found that the smaller lots with the open space actually out-appreciated the other ones. We looked at sales history, like about 850 data points as they marched out over 20 years of sales and sales and sales, and we measured the appreciation in value. And the smaller lots with open space outperformed the conventional lots. Then I went to Concord, Mass. And did the same thing with another one and had the same results.
Concord's a little different, but yeah.
Concord's a little different, yeah.
Well, yeah,
But-
mostly because Hatfield, or land is very expensive here, so it would make it a little more affordable for folks if the lot was smaller, which makes me think, would it be worth it for a landowner to be selling lots at a cheaper rate than if they were to do a conventional subdivision, I guess?
If all it was a conventional subdivision with big lots versus a conventional subdivision with little lots, probably the big lots would sell for more, and the little lots would sell for less, but there'd be more of them. So
Right.
who knows
Right.
where it would.
And if you're making it by right to do this, then.
Yeah.
And one of the issues is that we don't have really, our housing stock is pretty expensive in town, so, and a lot of that has to do with the zoning and the frontage needed. So.
Yeah. In Concord, we looked at a project that was done from a reclaimed gravel pit, actually, cluster project. And some of those lots were down to 1/8 of an acre. They're very small, but beautifully laid out open space. And we couldn't find a comparable conventional, so we compared it to the whole town, all the sales in Concord over a 10-year period. And the project that we selected actually outperformed the whole town. And I think the average lot size in the town was 3/4 of an acre. We averaged everything out, and these were down to 1/8. They were very small.
Well, yeah, I think there was something in the Gazette earlier this year from Kester Land Trust and saying that it actually pays to have open space preserved next to building lots because it makes their appreciations go up more so than in other areas.
All right, let me move along. All right, so basic NRPZ formulas, and these formulas you find on a worksheet. I've done worksheets like this for all the towns, and it looks like an IRS form that you just you fill in the blanks and you add and subtract and you crunch out the numbers. But really what you do is don't do that. You start out with my cursor's not working. You start out calculating dwelling units. You start out with the gross project area, the entire area of the project. You subtract all or part of constrained lands, and those would be wetlands, steep slopes, areas with easements already, water bodies, things like that. You take out what you've determined you're going to take out, and then you divide by a divisor. We call it a density divisor. And that's not a lot size. That's a number that you pick. Most towns have picked 5. We have 3.5, 3.5 and 5. One town picked 7.5. You divide by that. You add any units that you get by density bonuses or TDR, and that gives you the maximum number of dwelling units. So it's all done by formula with basic mapped information on the property. There's no yield plan where somebody creates a conventional subdivision plan and says, see, I could do this. And of course, they're very ambitious plans, and who knows if they could ever do it. But see, you don't have to fight over one of those. You just do the math and you get the number. And then the preserved land, again, you start with the gross project area, and then you multiply by the required percentage. And again, what we've seen is 0.65 to 0.90. And then you add any additional land from density bonuses or TDR, and add that up, and that gives you the minimum acreage of preserved land. So you know how many houses, you know how much land you have to preserve, and the last thing you do is you figure out how much you're going to have to put them on. And that's real simple. Gross project area, subtract the acreage of the preserved land, and that just gives you your developable land. And this number of units has to go on here.
Is the required percentage of the preserved land, is that determined by each municipality?
Yes. Yep.
Yeah, for our open space development bylaw, we're asked at least 50%. So this would be a pretty significant increase in that, what we were considering before.
So again, that's the worksheet, all that information. You put those numbers in, plug and chug your way down to the bottom, and you know everything you know. You need to know. But you still need to do an analysis of the whole project, the whole property, assessing the resources that are there, what's developable, what's not developable, what makes sense in order to access homes. So the applicant performs a conservation analysis. That's required. The applicant does that. And that gets submitted along with the subdivision proposal. And then the planning board makes conservation findings. This part actually gets written into your subdivision regulations, not the zoning bylaw, because it's part of the subdivision process. And the conservation findings, you know, if you agree completely with the applicant, you just your findings are that analysis is adequate, or you can modify the analysis. You can discuss it with the applicant, and you can make slightly different findings, and then the plan has to be adjusted accordingly. So just quickly, on a 100-acre piece like this, the kinds of things that you'd be looking for, again, are the undeveloped road frontage, the field up top, the steep area, the trail, the wetlands down at those resources. And those are the kind of resources that you keep in mind in the analysis, and that's what kind of drives the development where it does. Instead of being deep into the parcel, it's up near the road. It's kind of adjacent to the existing development. It's done in such a way that the field still remains, not too many curb cuts. You still have a block of open space. You're a long ways from the wetland. You've accomplished a lot of goals. So that would be how the analysis would work for that particular piece. So Brewster on the Cape has adopted NRPZ. And they did it to protect their drinking water supply area. And they did it in these two areas of town. These are, oops. Sounds just like mine. These are areas, districts of critical planning concern. So those were the areas that they decided to use the NRPZ on. So any subdivision within those two tan areas has to follow the NRPZ. Here's one in Shutesbury, in my town, that was approved by my planning board. I guess this is around 35, 40 acres altogether. Most of it was preserved. There's a couple vernal pools. There was an existing driveway that led to a house here. It was a private driveway. This was converted to a shared driveway. to serve these 2 lots. 3 more lots were actually possible in this plan, but the Amherst Water Supply bought these lots out and added them to the open space. That's the way it ended up. So this whole project ended up just adding a couple more lots at the end of that driveway and preserving all the rest of it. That was the first one that I know of that was approved in Massachusetts.
And that was predominantly wooded forest land?
Yes, yes. Now here's one that is in the works in Wendell, 120 acres, and this has an agricultural component. That's an agricultural field there. There's some wetlands here, active forestry going on the rest of the piece. There's the town road that goes around. So the way this is going to end up, there's going to be a developable area over here. There's already one house here. There's already a house here, so the developable area goes around that house, connects back to the road, and then the rest of it's going to be preserved.
Even though that's the farmland there that they're going to develop?
Yeah, I mean, there's an existing road here. It's an old road.
I guess what I'm trying to get at is that we are very agricultural, and that's one of the issues is, well, even with the open space development bylaw, a lot of the examples are from wooded forested areas, and it was very hard to see how that could translate into a predominantly heavily, some of the best farmland in the world, according to National Geographic, and how we're going to preserve that here with a bylaw that may or may not have examples of predominant, really nice agricultural land. I don't know.
Yeah, in Wendell, it's there's not much farmland of real good quality. I mean, you know, this is 1,200 feet up. It's you know, the potatoes are rocks, and but in writing it, in writing the purposes of it, in writing the conservation analysis part, I mean, that could be emphasized. We made very clear all through this bylaw that, you know, deep agricultural soils are what you're really after here. So here's I don't know if it's slide 25 or not, but this is the landowner acceptance of low-density NRPZ. They like it because it's prompt and predictable permitting, it's by right, and it's by formula. You can very quickly figure out what you've got on a piece of land. There's not a lot of back and forth and guessing. Greater design flexibility, no specific lot area. Anywhere where there's Title V, of course, you have to meet those requirements. No stated frontage or setback requirements. The only setbacks I've seen are mostly 10 feet from any property line, just so you can get a vehicle around a structure on the same property. Housing diversity, again, we encourage all underlying types allowed. Attractive features, like lower infrastructure costs. I think that's the biggest one right there, is that there's no frontage, there's no requirement to build hundreds of feet of roadway for every single house. Shared driveways, much more reasonable alternative to full-scale subdivision roads, density bonuses, transferred development rights. And the owner may retain the resource lands up to 90% of the total parcel area. So this is just a slight deviation talking about A&R and flexible frontage. I can go through this very quickly. This is the 100-acre A&R, 31 A&R lots on 100 acres right on a town line in central Mass. In Shutesbury's bylaw and in most of the other ones that adopt NRPZ, they also go for something called flexible frontage, which is an alternative way of laying out standard road front lots, A&R lots. That's what 3 lots would look like in Shutesbury, with the frontage and the lot sizes. You can see on the right-hand side, there's a old trail here, which goes right into somebody's backyard. So needless to say, the trail has been eliminated by this development process. What flexible frontage allows the planning board to do is to waive or reduce frontage requirements for a specific proposal if the applicant is willing to redesign to meet some of the objectives of the town. Here, 3 curb cuts have been reduced to 1 for a shared driveway. The trail on the right-hand side here remains 1 curb cut, mostly undisturbed road frontage. And the way that was done is this lot here has the full frontage that's required on this road. This lot has frontage has narrower frontage that comes right down here. Remember, this is a shared driveway, so you can't really get frontage off of it. This lot has no frontage on this road. It's kind of landlocked, but it's connected through the shared driveway, has deeded right to use the shared driveway, so it doesn't really need frontage for a connection. And this one, way in the back here, this lot extends all the way down and around here and gets its frontage from over here, although nothing over here is going to be disturbed. So all the houses are kind of on the left side of the piece, and the right side of the piece is pretty much preserved. And in so doing, they get an extra unit. You have the ability to waive or reduce frontage sufficient to give an incentive to someone to do this because they may get another unit.
With a shared driveway, do they maintain clearing it in the winter and that kind of thing, and
Yes.
maintenance of it?
Yes, that would not be a town road. That'd be the responsibility of these 4 landowners. And you need to set it up in the deeds right from go. Most shared driveways that don't work because there are no documents. Nobody knows who's in charge, what the obligations are. It's informal, and it was done 50 years ago, and nobody remembers who agreed to what.
Right, like versus a cul-de-sac, traditional cul-de-sac driveway, which would be then a town's expense.
The town, yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Jeff, do you have much more?
No,
Okay. Because we have other folks. We have.
I am wicked near done. Accessory apartments, the one in the back is a detached accessory apartment up top. Single-family dwelling on the right, that's just another aspect of that whole package of conservation-friendly zoning. How to put in another dwelling unit without another curb cut, without creating another lot. This is just making better use of an existing house lot.
So we have like I said, we just passed accessory apartments, dwelling units in our recent town meeting. With this kind of NRPZ zoning, would you waive some of those kind of restrictions we put on that for this type of development, or would you keep it as we pass the accessory dwelling unit for this? Or I'm just wondering if there would be flexibility in allowing a larger dwelling unit as what we currently passed, or because right now they have to be kind of attached and they have to be 900 square feet and that kind of thing is what we just passed.
Yeah, we couldn't. That would not be legal here.
I'm just curious if we passed the NRPZ with more flexible zoning, would alternatives be allowed?
Well, we wrote our accessory apartment bylaw separately. And it allows for detached. They have to be within 75 feet of the principal structure. We're thinking of going to 100 on that. So you could have a detached garage with a top that could be finished over into an accessory apartment if it's existing.
I guess what I'm saying is, you have to stay within our current accessory dwelling unit bylaw that we just passed? Would that apply with this, or would there be separate or leeway with the accessory dwelling with an NRPZ development? Or is that up to us?
There would be leeway if you wrote it in that way.
Okay.
But our bylaws that we just passed about this would supersede this as far as the restrictions on accessory apartments.
Yes.
Okay.
If a single-family dwelling within one of these wanted an accessory apartment, they'd have to go for it, just like anybody else.
Right. Okay.
Thank you.
And owner occupied.
Or that's what our current bylaw
Our
says,
current
yeah.
bylaw is owner occupied.
So yeah, what do you, yeah.
We state either unit must be.
Right.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
That's the presentation. One of my associates, Joel Russell, is over in Northampton. He and I wrote all this stuff together. So.
Okay.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
You're very knowledgeable. We look forward to.
Yeah, definitely continuing the conversation. for
Yeah.
sure.
Try to integrate this into what we're doing.
Yeah, and get it in the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission. This is, I guess, new to them if they were trying to get us to do the open space development bylaw.
Yeah, I'm not sure what role they want to play.
Okay.
I think they're interested. I think they're interested in having you hire me to do this, and then at the same time turn it into a model for
Correct,
them.
yes.
I believe.
So they want us to pay,
And
and they'll reap the benefits.
maybe they have.
The region will reap the benefits.
Right. Right.
I think
right.
they may still have a little budget for this
Oh.
to kick in, and so their budget gets them a model, and the part you pay gets
Right.
you something you can put on
Right.
them.
Okay, great. Thank you.
And I do go to town meetings, and when these come up, and I can play any role you want. I can be off to the side. I can just be there to answer questions. I can give the whole presentation, whatever.
I imagine if,
Well,
moving
yeah,
forward
well,
with this, there'll probably be like
yeah.
a public meeting on this for folks to ask questions and then come
Right.
up in May's town meeting, I would guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Could you just hit that light behind you, please?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm going to be shuffling around.
That's fine. We'll work around you.
moving. Okay.
Yeah. Okay, we're going to take a quick break. So we're back. Gentleman from Treeworks wanted to come in and discuss future cannabis licensing. So what would you like to discuss?
Let us have it.
Yeah. Do you want me to speak into the microphone?
Yes, please.
I think you're good enough, but.
Yeah, you're good.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So just to give you guys, I want to start by giving you a little update on our progress for product
Could you
name.
first introduce your name? And
Yeah, sure.
right?
So
Yeah.
my name is Tim. This is McKay. And then Milo, our third partner, I believe stepped out. He may have thought the break was a bit longer, but he may be back as well. But we'll go on without him.
Yep.
And so just to give you guys a little info, we met with you last fall.
Yes.
First to propose the idea and then to get the special permit with site plan approval from the planning board as well. And then we signed our host community agreement with the select board in late December. And those are all the host community agreement as well as a community outreach meeting, which we held at Smith Academy in late August, as well as rights to a properly zoned cannabis property are all requirements to submit a complete application to the State Cannabis Control Commission for them to then review and then grant you a license. So we did all that with you guys in the fall, submitted our full application in early December, and then waited for 240 days before we heard any response to our application, any feedback whatsoever, while we've been paying rent on that property. And we believe we're doing everything in our power to keep pushing that forwards and keep moving our progress along and pursuing that dream, but we're a little bit more reality-based with our timeline of how the commission is moving things along. Without getting too much in details of the way the commission works, it just seems like it's very slow, and they're a little overwhelmed by what they're trying to do, creating this new recreational cannabis market here in Massachusetts. So, you know, we're on that side of it where it's been a little frustrating, disappointing, but we're doing everything, like I said, we can. And we're also recognizing that since we waited for 8 months before hearing back on our application, that if we were to submit for another license in the coming months, that we'd probably wait for perhaps twice that long, just to give you a ballpark. So we're trying to plan ahead of time, now that we have some time on our hands, and pursue future licenses, potentially at that 3 West Street property. There's a few different licenses you can apply for within the cannabis industry besides the product manufacturing license. We're considering a variety of them at the moment.
Excuse me, this is Zapka's property?
This is the
Yes.
property owned by John Laurie Zapka, 3 West Street, right next to the Chatter House. Yep. And so we're considering pursuing future licenses. We wanted to let you guys know about that today. And just kind of to give you guys an idea of...
So let me just,
Oh, yeah, go right ahead.
your first application was for manufacturing.
Yes.
Correct.
Okay. So, and that's what we're waiting on. I thought all that had gone through already.
Yeah, so we don't have our state license yet. We're hoping to have our provisional license by the end of this calendar year. Just to, it's our hope.
Right.
We're kind of at their whim, and then we'll move forward to that, and then they'll give us an inspection to get that final license some point in 2020 is kind of our thought on that. Yeah, so just to give you guys an idea of like what we need before submitting for that license, we need to have, like I said, the rights to...
Additional license, I'm sorry.
For additional licenses, we need that rights to the property. We already have that by paying rent for the 3 West Street, and then we need to hold a community outreach meeting with the town, and then we also need to have our host community agreement signed. The special permit with site plan approval is not a specific requirement to submit that application.
This is for what license now?
We're saying for any license.
Oh, okay.
Any license
Any
in the
additional
cannabis
license.
Okay.
industry beside
Additional,
any
okay.
additional license, that special permit from the town is not...
If you wanted to sell directly from that site, is that one of the
Retail.
options?
So
yeah,
retail,
sorry.
cultivation, delivery, these are all potential licenses.
Yep.
Yeah.
We're gonna, if we're going to go forwards with the town of applying for another license, we'll set a meeting with you guys with a specific license, and then we'll present that to you. This is kind of just informally, just to let you know that we're interested in doing this in the future.
Okay.
So is it my understanding that if you were to pursue another license, you would be under the same waiting time period that you've endured
Sounds
so
like it.
far?
Likely longer.
Oh,
Most
okay.
likely longer.
More applicants are added to the
Right,
Cannabis
so
Control
so
Commission
it's
queue.
congestion on their part, so to speak.
Totally.
Okay.
Just to give you guys some info as far as the licensing procedure too. For example, Urban Grown, as you guys know, they initially got a host community agreement with the town of Whately. That allowed them to submit their application. They actually received a provisional license with this location in Whately that then fell through.
Right.
But they had met those initial requirements to submit the license. So the potential is that we could submit the license once we get that submit the application once we have a host community agreement with you guys, and then potentially use it in another space as well, just to throw that out there. And we're open to using the 3 West Street for location for other license opportunities, but because of this kind of conundrum of you must have rights to a property to submit, and then you submit and wait and you pay and you waste money, we're looking at as an opportunity to gain another valuable resource for our company to potentially gain another license to use down the line.
Yeah, and I have a question on, again, because this is so new territory for all of us. So we have a law that we've only have, a certain number of licenses we're allowed to have in town. Would that mean you would take potentially another license up from, I think it's 3 we allowed in town?
Now, is that only for retail locations?
Retail and, yeah,
I don't have the- I don't
retail
have the-
and,
I don't-
I'm just curious if like you would be taking, forgive the word, but monopolizing, I guess, the licenses that we have in town.
Totally. So my understanding is that number 3 is specific to retail locations. So in the case, if we were to apply for a retail location, we would be looking to get one of those 3
Right.
licenses, yes.
Okay.
But then if you're trying to get another asset somewhere outside of Hatfield, you would take, like, I don't know how that works, because, I don't know, I need to learn more
It would
about all
depend
that.
It would depend on the other community's bylaw.
Right.
You can only
mean,
hold
each-
3 licenses.
Each
As
license.
a company, yeah.
So we could grow, manufacture, and retail, similar to
Yeah.
Netta or
Each
Inza
license is in
Town.
its own silo. They're all separate.
Right.
Right, I'm just curious if the host agreement with our town would then affect their, like, they could apply to get a retail license through another host agreement in town and then not be doing it in town. That's what I need to do some more research on
Totally.
how
And
that works.
full disclosure, we are open to different ideas. We're not trying to apply for a license in Hatfield with the idea that we're going to go to another town and then transfer it there. But that is something that is a possibility, especially, we're kind of understanding that we don't understand exactly what went on, but we know that Urban Grown, their business withdrew their proposal and what they said was partly they were meeting some resistance from some people in town, some residents of Hatfield. So we'd want to make sure before, going forth with the operation that we have everyone on board with it. But there is the
A
potential
lot
to.
of it was problems with their application in general too,
Right.
along.
But I think one of the things,
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
you have chosen a location that's probably a lot more agreeable to most people. You're in an industrial zone already. We're not talking about a bunch of neighbors that are going to have something in their face that they weren't happy about.
Well, they were in the marijuana zone.
Right.
So,
So, and that I guess brings us to the next point, and we understand that, and we're exploring the license opportunities. I think clearly the property we've chosen is most suitable for 4 different types of license, and just off the bat, that would be potential growing. We're already doing product manufacturing, that's already been passed and approved, retail, and transportation. So those are probably the most immediately useful applications for that property. And I guess we just wanted to ask, what can we do? Obviously, the location is much better than the one chosen by the other company that's moved on. But what can we do, or what type of prep work should we be prepared for if we do, let's say, decide to grow cannabis on that space? Is there anything that we should be aware of that didn't work out, other than the location with the previous application, or was it really just the location?
no, we need a plan.
Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah.
And just as we did the first time, Berkshire Design put together a site plan. There was no issues with the property, obviously, that plan. But other than the particular location of the previous applicant, Urban Grown, was there any other, we weren't here for that meeting, and I'm just curious if there's any major issues that we can be.
Like wetlands and floodplain
Yeah,
issues.
there was issues like
Okay.
that.
So it wasn't-
There was
so
zoning issues.
A lot of the issues that were not related to people issues were things, and their lawyer approached me after one of the meetings and said he fell down on the job by not knowing all the zoning about things like parking. There's a lot of little things.
That was a rural residential area.
Right, right. So that was, there were a lot of complications with that application, and they had not done their homework adequately to proceed, even if there had been no pushback from the neighbors.
Sure.
They were not as thorough as they needed to be. So if I had to give you a piece of advice, be beyond what you think is thorough.
Sure.
Just like last time when you came in.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we were met with, odor and what's the appearance of the property, and so we're aware of the basics, but,
Lighting, where, and
Sure,
where are you going to put your dumpster, and
Sure.
how is the compost if you're going to grow?
course,
What are you
of course.
doing with that? A lot of, and the security obviously is another component of that, which is a little different considering the zoning of your parcel
Right.
Yeah.
versus the other parcel of Urban Grown, which I wouldn't necessarily compare them because they are different.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, no, they are not comparable. They're very
and
different.
we feel we have an appropriate space
think we do.
to go forward with any of the 4 and all the other possibilities in the space that we have, so.
Off the cuff, do you guys see issues with any of those that McKay mentioned?
We would have to study it, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, okay.
Cool.
Well, we appreciate your time.
Yeah.
And we'll be seeing us again if we decide to go forward with other licenses. The same process we went through the first time.
Same process.
I know the cannabis control, I know preliminarily they ask you to have a meeting with the community or people, abutters and that kind of thing. I don't know if that's necessarily the case or needed if you're going for a second permit, but it's.
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Every individual license that is the case. So that host community agreement and that community outreach meeting with all the letters to the butters, that's those are both requirements
And that's
before
really,
submitting an
very
application.
important.
Very
part of the
important.
process, yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks for your
And are you guys open to the possibility of, because of that timeline mentioned, possibly us going through with that and submitting an application before receiving the special permit with site plan approval, if we think that may be 2 years out from when we're submitting?
I mean, we'll hear the case, I think.
Yeah, we got to hear the case.
All right, that's great.
And thanks for your patience sitting through the last presentation.
No problem.
I kept looking at all you guys.
Fascinating.
This has gone
You
on
guys
for a while.
learned a lot.
Learned a lot, yeah.
Learned a lot
Right.
tonight.
Well, thanks for your time,
Yeah,
guys.
great, thank
Appreciate
you.
it.
Mr. Day?
Good evening.
Hello.
My name is Bob Day. This is my brother Jack. This is my son Nick. We're here tonight because we're interested in purchasing 164 Depot Road in North Hatfield, better known to you probably as the Pomeroy Lumber Company
Okay,
property.
okay.
So
The same property as the post office or behind that?
it's not the same, no.
Okay.
It's, it actually runs alongside.
Along the tracks,
Yep.
yeah.
Right. So, Jack and I are not only brothers, but our goal is to generate a business partnership, form an LLC, and purchase this property. So our short-term intent here is for storage, for our own use. Looking forward, we may be interested in renting out storage space. And in part of our homework for this whole process, we were advised to meet with you people. I met with the building inspector, and he's fully aware of what we're doing, and also agreed that coming to see you would be a good idea as well.
So what are you storing there?
Jack and I have several antique vehicles, and the buildings would be, very good for that. General things, snowmobiles.
Right, personal stuff?
Personal stuff, yeah.
Okay. This
As
is
a
per-
personal storage
Yeah.
for now?
For us, that's what our initial goal is. But being zoned business,
Yeah.
we thought we should touch base with you and run a few questions by you
Okay.
prior to going forward. So
This is the first that we've heard of this, so if we can't answer everything, we'll have to have you come in again.
that's fine.
Okay.
Great, thank you. So the easy question is, does the current zoning, which, and believe me, I could be wrong, the paperwork indicates that it's zoned business. So for what we want to do, you don't see any problem with that use. Would that be right?
Yes, that would be right.
Pending, everything else is met. But yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, good. What other,
We're talking about personal use.
correct,
Yep.
yep.
Personal use, but possibly a business to warehouse and storage.
I guess the question
Well,
is,
that's a separate issue.
what are you coming to
Correct.
us with?
Yeah.
And what you're asking for?
We're asking for a wide variety of answers so that we can plan for the future. So initially, it'll be for our own personal use, but should we decide that we have more space than we need, could we take one of the buildings and rent it to someone for storage reasons, or for a business to have storage on site? So it would be two questions, no question about it.
And the storage, there are actually 3 structures on the
Right.
property currently,
Yeah.
plus a foundation that had been set at the far end of the lot. And so I think that the middle structure is where we foresee putting vehicles. The far end structure is a 2-story structure, and that's where it probably wouldn't lend itself to vehicle storage. It would lend itself to other personal storage, but it could also, it has a loading dock, so it could be useful to a business to store, business inventory, that kind of thing. And that's where that thought comes from.
All right, so would you be, on the foundation that is currently there, you planning on putting up a building?
That leads to another question. Is that an option? It is our understanding that the Pomeroy Lumber Company, I probably even shouldn't say that because I'm not sure of that, but someone in the past has gotten authorization for 4 structures, and all 4 foundations were installed at the time. One of the foundations was never built upon.
Yeah, that was
So-
that was probably quite a while ago.
It was, correct.
So we would have to, again, we would have to research that
And wonder if it's grandfathered in the,
and then wonder if it's
right.
grandfathered in.
You might be grandfathered, may be no issue whatsoever.
So we'd have to research
Right.
that.
Okay.
Yeah, looking at the table of use, though, it looks like if it's self-service storage, I think you need to be a little bit clearer on what you want to do with the property in
Yeah.
order for us to answer your questions a little bit better. But if it's like a business for self-storage, like, it says to look at the commercial development performance standards in our bylaws, and it has a whole list of stuff you should be looking for, like driveway access and parking and screening and that kind of thing.
The
But
whole-
it
yeah,
depends
it's gonna
on
be the whole
what you're
thing.
looking for. I think you need to be a little more specific so we can be a little more helpful in our
Right.
answers for you.
But it seems that is more of it down the road part of it.
Correct.
That would have to be, you'd have to come back again
Yeah,
with another proposal,
with a plan.
with another plan. And hopefully by that time, we would certainly have known whether that other foundation is grandfathered in or not. And if there's a problem, or if you would have to, have you spoken to the building department about any of that?
He didn't seem to find there's any problem
Okay.
building on that.
Okay,
But, it's better to ask everybody than
absolutely.
Yeah.
than just,
Right.
Yeah,
is our approach, I guess.
yeah. No, we appreciate that.
Yeah,
So, if we were to be able to purchase this, we go in, we do our thing, and now we decide we want to lease out one of the buildings, we come to you with a plan.
Yep.
This is
Yeah.
what we want to do. You people say,
It's a lot
Yes or
different when
no?
it's residential versus, putting a business in there.
right.
Yeah.
okay.
Right.
Now,
You're in a pretty
again-
good zone there.
Pardon?
You're in a pretty good place there
Yes.
to do what you want to
Zoning-wise.
do.
Zoning wise, yes.
Yeah,
Okay, good. That was my assumption, but it's better to
Yeah.
hear and,
It's a different use. It's a transfer. So you have to go through all the requirements.
oh, okay.
Yeah.
And that, again, like, once we have a better picture of what you want to do, yeah, would be helpful.
Okay. We were interested if any of you knew of any environmental concerns with the property?
Have you talked to the Conservation Commission about that? Because that
No.
would be someone else I would talk to
Okay.
about that.
Okay.
have you spoken to Scott about any potential, is Scott still the owner?
Who's the
I
owner?
believe his mother is.
Okay, and have you spoken to them at all about them disclosing from a real estate standpoint?
Any EPA
Any
issues,
brownfields, any EPA issues, any of that stuff?
Any of that?
So it would behoove you to get a commitment from them on nothing other than a real estate basis
Okay.
of what might have gone on there in the past, which might present problems for you in the future.
Even right-of-ways, is that like a weird property where there might even be?
Well, it's got the
There are-
train tracks
Yeah,
there
that's
too.
true,
so-
train tracks.
So,
There is a right-of-way. There's a
They're going to
property
get a mortgage.
behind
They're going to have to do all that for
the
the
post
bank.
office
Yeah,
who has a right-of-way.
Right?
right.
And there's
but even that in like
There's a
the real
piece of
estate
property
transfer is important,
at
I
the
think,
end
too.
of this property that has a right-of-way through as well.
Oh, okay.
All right.
This property is long and narrow.
Yes.
Right.
And it is a roadway from the street
All the
to
way
the other
through.
property to the
Yes,
back.
okay.
So
Yeah.
it's very
Yep.
accessible in that regard. Now, would you find any major concern generating a residence on this property?
Like, would it be, in your mind, mixed use, like residence and a business eventually? Or I'm
Sure.
just trying, yeah.
Yeah?
Well, it's own business, so it's not,
Is it part of the overlay or anything like that?
I don't know. We have to look.
Yeah, we need a little more, yeah, we'll have to look into that a little bit.
Okay.
We have to look at the map.
The
don't know if that's
property at the end of this property was a part of the Pomeroy Lumber Company, and they sold it, and that is a residence.
Oh,
So we asked that, with that question, would there be a problem if we had a residence?
right. So I guess one of the things that would need to know is if when that was separated out, when that was separated out, did they had to get a zoning variance
Yeah.
to be able to do that on that property? Or did they get a zoning variance for the whole property? You know, did Pomeroy get the variance before they sold that lot? Or did they buy that lot and then get a variance to build the house? So
Okay.
it kind of matters
Strictly for
which
that.
came first.
Yeah.
Because if Pomeroy did it right, then they may have gotten a variance for the whole property
Special permit.
Yeah.
to be able to do more on it than they were already doing.
Okay.
Where would I find that answer?
The,
A zone,
the zoning variances go with the deeds.
Right, so you could look, you'd have to get an attorney, well, you wouldn't have to get an attorney, but you probably down at the Hall of Records.
Yeah.
You'd go down
Northampton.
to the Hall of Records and pull up that property and dig through it. And you could do it yourself, they will allow you to come in there and do it.
Yeah.
But it's challenging to know what you're seeing.
Right.
right. Okay.
Okay.
And did you look up the dwelling, if it would,
Yeah, it's going to be special permit.
so yeah, if you wanted to put a house in with that business.
Special permit?
Right.
PV, that's-
So, and then the other option of what you could
Yeah,
do
what is that?
is you
It's-
could possibly want to put an apartment in one of those buildings and turn a building
I know
into
what
a
you mean.
mixed-use building.
Which is really what we are thinking about.
Right, so you could have an office or some office spaces at the bottom of the
Low.
building and some residential space at the top of the building.
Right.
And that would be, you know, maybe an easier way to go than getting a building permit and a zoning variance for another building lot out of it and then building a house.
Right.
Correct, and that's exactly what we wanted to do.
Okay,
Yeah.
Or potentially.
right.
So, of course, the next step following with that question is no problem getting a septic system?
That's,
The property currently has no water, no sewer.
That would be the Board of Health.
Is there sewer out there?
It would be, I think, septic,
Okay,
pretty much, you know?
yeah, and
Sewer's not out there.
and if
Not
we're
out
reading
there.
this right, just going back to what we were saying about putting the residents with the business, it would be just a special permit, not necessarily site plan approval, just a special permit
Okay.
from the board.
Thanks.
Okay. So, getting back to putting a building on the existing foundation, would that be something that you guys would decide? Or do I need to go to the building inspector for that?
Well, you already talked to him, and
Correct.
he said he wouldn't have a problem with that.
Correct.
So you'd have to get a building permit from him.
right.
Okay.
You have to pull a permit from him.
But as far as you guys are concerned, you wouldn't have any,
I
It
can't,
depends on what the use is. would
Yeah.
be for
Still need to
that.
present.
Yeah,
again, the plan and the
You're going to have to present,
process.
yes.
Right.
You'd have to come in and present the
especially
whole
with
plan.
Conservation Commission, if potentially there are some environmental issues with that property as well.
Right.
I would definitely reach out to them.
And there could be, considering it was a lumberyard, you don't know.
right.
Right. Okay. Now, at one point in time, they
Was
had
there,
a rail.
was there ever any gasoline tanks buried in the ground, or
I'm thinking not.
oil tank buried in the ground?
No, nothing like that. The only heat they have there now is a
Wood?
propane tank that's out in front, above ground. And I think it was all just cold storage, you know?
Yeah.
Lumber came in, it was undercover and
Okay.
then left. So at one time, they had a rail spur that was active to, lumber would come in, they'd offload it, and the spur is still there. Understanding that that would be a railroad question,
Yes.
do you people find any objection to something like that, to reactivate that? Again, it would be a special permit.
I don't know, is that our jurisdiction?
I don't think that it would be our jurisdiction. I think that's about the railroad.
You're
and-
going to have to talk to the railroad.
Yeah, and,
Okay.
and, you know, whatever arrangements you would make with the railroad to reopen the spur
Yeah, that's a
and
good question.
be
I
able
don't
to
know.
service you there.
Yeah, that's something that,
I would think that they would be the first people we would go to, but
Right. You're doing this right by coming to us. So,
Thank you.
and we get the fact that you have a ton of questions.
Yeah.
and this is a unique property
Right.
in that we don't have all the answers to that
Right.
either.
it's kind of how we felt about it as
Yeah.
well.
Right. Good.
But you don't want to own something if
You can't
you
use it.
can't do anything with
Right.
it. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay, so just...
Railroad, you should contact them probably as soon, because railroad takes a long time with things.
There's a guy that lives out on the end of Elm Street, on the front end of Elm Street. Joe LaPearl is his name.
Yes. I
You know Joe?
Yeah.
Joe's had years of, he used to work with the railroad. He has years and years of experience knowing about the railroad. He'd be a good one to talk to. He probably knows a ton about that property also, if my recollection of him is accurate.
Okay, good.
Great.
Thank you, I appreciate
Yeah.
that. So with this zoning, is there a zoning of business? Is there any restrictions of time of day that the... Okay,
Yeah,
It was in there. It's a little more flexible. I think it said, there's the timing, it's a little bit after that. Excuse us.
no hurry.
It's in section 6.3. Sorry. Where was it?
general business. So, general business,
Oh, that's decibels.
this is sound, yeah. Then there's going to be, if you have residents, there's going to be parking requirements as well for the residents and for guests, depending on what the residence is.
Have you looked at the zoning bylaws enough?
I have not, in the next,
You can access them on the website,
Perfect.
Hatfield Town website.
Hatfield Town, okay.
Yeah.
So my next question was going to be, what are you looking through there so that we could do that? Is that what that is?
Yeah,
The zoning bylaws?
It is the zoning
Okay.
bylaw, and that's what you're going to be looking for. And insofar as conservation is concerned, if you need to talk with them, that's pretty easy to get through. Planning board will be the last stop for a permit.
Okay,
So
start at conservation.
conservation
Come
is
to you.
good to get out of the way.
Yeah, because we hear from them and impacting our decision and questioning on what they hear from you.
Okay.
They could be the first ones that'll shut you right down
Yeah.
with a problem. I don't mean on purpose, just if there's a problem.
Yeah, we
Their
have to look
problem
at
may
the,
be insurmountable.
We have to look at the zoning map to see the mixed-use overlay district. So
Yeah,
this-
it also really depends too, like we're saying, is what you really want to do with the property. Like if you're saying you want to put a residence there, that changes how we evaluate and ask, and how we will, the questions we'll ask and what we need from you versus just the business, for example, so.
Yeah. Well, we're trying to anticipate all possible uses and get as many questions as we can. You know, really, as
Questions are fine.
Jimmy said, the thought process was that second floor on the larger building might be a live-in manager or something.
Right.
That would have an apartment up top. That's
That
really
would
the
make a
thought.
ton of sense.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, sorry we don't have more clear answers for you.
No, this is,
Okay.
this has been great. I appreciate it.
So is there any way to touch base with you people other than to sign up for this meeting?
You
Is
can
that-
have another informal conversation like this too,
You
right?
have to go through me.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, all the correspondence is through me.
All right. Great.
Okay. All right, do you have anything else?
No, I'm good.
If you have any other questions, I would say to email them to you, Wilma,
Yep. just-
All right.
and she'll get them to us.
Excellent.
Oh, okay, good. Okay, that's
Just the
good.
conduit.
Yeah, or even if you have your list there that's together in the shape you want it, if you could email that to Wilma so everyone can see it.
And then we could do some more homework on some of those questions instead of just
Yeah.
asking us here.
Okay,
All right,
Yeah.
okay.
great.
So this is just new to us, so we weren't trying to put anybody on the spot, but just wanted to at least start the ball rolling to
Yeah,
know
no, this is fine.
the
Yeah.
process that we wanted to go.
No, this is fine. This
And
is-
also
this is
knowing
what we do.
Yeah, we don't know until we see something
Sure,
official for us to say definite yes or no and that kind of way.
understood.
So.
Great.
Great.
Thank you very
All right,
much.
thank you all very
Appreciate your
much.
time.
Coming. Bob Day, you look like you lost a few pounds, Bob Day.
Well, you retired, remember?
Coast Guard
Ms.
uniform
Cross?
used to pull pretty tight.
Is it Cross?
Crochet.
Oh, Della Crochet. Excuse me. No hyphen.
Hi, how are you? Good. Thanks for bearing with us.
Thank you, yes.
Take care, guys.
What can we help you with?
Appreciate you fitting me on the agenda. I should have made more copies of these, but can I get these?
Sure. We can, yeah,
We're looking at.
Definitely one for Wilma.
yeah, we'll just,
Thank you.
These are actually
We can
different
share,
designs,
it's fine.
so
Yeah.
there's two
Oh,
different. Should I sit back here?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yep,
please.
You're good right
Gotcha.
there.
Okay. So my name is Gabriella Della Croce. I work with the Pioneer Valley Workers Center, and we are part of creating a small community farm on Linseed Road in Hatfield. I've spoken a little bit with Wilma on the phone and met with the Conservation Commission to bring them these initial plans. But people suggested that I just sort of touch base informally with you all as well to get any advice or things ideas about things we should take into consideration. Challenge that we're still working out with the Conservation Commission is that there's a number of drainage ditches that are throughout the field, and there's actually no way to put, like where the frontage is, no way to put a parking lot that doesn't come up into a 100-foot buffer zone of either one drainage ditch or another. And so I need to check back with them, and I'm waiting to hear back about that. But, this whole process is brand new to me, so I wanted to, get your advice as well and see if you had any thoughts on those designs. There's a landscape architect who's volunteering his time with us that drew those up for us, one of which has a driveway entrance coming in on the right side of the field if you're facing out towards the road. And we think that would be better because either way we're going to need some kind of informal access to the back of the fields. We only have the back 4.5 acres leased, and another local farmer has the front parts of the field leased.
so your goal is another community garden?
Not a community garden, it's a community farm. So we're a nonprofit organization, and we're going to have probably about a half acre that's like commonly shared between a number of our members. But there's six of our members that will be farming there.
Okay,
Yeah,
all right.
Where's the?
And the property is behind RK Miles.
exactly.
And
Right
Stiebel,
up.
Stiebel,
Yes, exactly.
Okay,
Steve
okay.
Eltron and
Yep, okay.
Rocky Miles.
This is their parking.
Okay.
And this is like RK. And that.
Oh, okay, I get you now. Yep.
Okay.
And the farm part is in the city of Northampton's part of the property? Because that's a weird parcel in that.
It is a weird parcel. The town line, I don't know if it's clear on there, cuts straight through it diagonally.
Yes.
So most of it actually is on the city of Northampton's land, and then a little corner piece is on Hatfield's land, but the piece that all the frontage is in Hatfield, and that's where we would want to put a small gravel parking lot.
And looking at your two designs, I drove by there the other day, and I noticed that there's definitely like tracks in how you access that part of the field is definitely closer towards the property line, closer towards 5 and 10.
Exactly. That's the design that has the driveway entrance on the side is where the existing, not road, but just by driving through with tractors and cars, there's kind of a mud, sometimes muddy path that we've formed, just needing to access the back fields this summer.
Right.
Yeah.
So we thought also from a design perspective as well as aesthetics, which the neighborhood, when we had a forum here with the Ag Commission last winter, expressed a lot of concerns about the aesthetics. We thought it would be better to kind of have everything shift to be closer to the commercial side, like neatly tied to the border there with RK Miles. So that's, I don't know, I guess, again, like I said, the main thing is we don't know what the Conservation Commission will say about how to handle that, or whether there's an agricultural exemption, I mean, or we should put it in swales or something. I know that's not as much your jurisdiction maybe, but yeah, that's.
Yeah, I guess that's
where
the first question. Have you talked to the Conservation Commission about this?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I brought them the first design, and they pointed out to me that there needed to be this 100-foot buffer zone, which I wasn't aware of. So I took it back to the landscape architect who's volunteering with us, and we went out there, and he was like, "Oh, actually, there's no way you can't have something that isn't, if in some way bumping into one like a buffer zone on either side." And I haven't. You know, I was at their last meeting last month and emailed them, but haven't heard back.
Yeah, I followed up.
Yeah.
I haven't gotten a response either. Did you talk with Kyle?
He's their building
I called him and he just told me to come to these meetings to go to the Conservation Commission and meet with you all. Yeah, he didn't have, I didn't talk to him about this particular issue, actually, no.
It's also interesting because, you know, agricultural, like, we're a right to farm community, and so a lot of agricultural businesses have a lot of leeway and stuff like this, but this is an interesting scenario where it's Kestrel Land Trust owns it technically, and you're leasing it or renting it, and so there's this.
But for us, our issue is the driveway,
Right.
the parking.
Right.
And how many parking spaces are you talking? Is this?
1, 2, 3,
8.
4. Yeah, and turn, yeah.
And I know the city of Northampton has expressed expanding trails from Fitzgerald Lake and having more trails and stuff, and their idea too is to have some sort of parking so people can access trails as well as access
Yes.
to this garden.
Thank you for bringing that up. Initially, they had, we were hoping that we might be able to partner with them and have them build the parking lot since it is long-term city land. And they were like, we're not planning on doing that in the immediate future. Like, happy to have you all do it, but they, didn't go for that.
And the current issues, you just like park there and.
Well, the current issue is I think the parking we've been doing isn't safe because there isn't, well, sometimes it's too muddy. So in the spring, like we won't be able to get in on that access road. So what we've been doing is having cars park along the side of Linseed Road, along that row of arborvitae trees that's near Archie Miles' lot. And people really whip around that corner. That was something that neighbors expressed being concerned about in terms of safety. And we, of course, we really want to do everything we can to have it, a smooth landing in the neighborhood and not have people like unsafely parking their cars. There's kids. A number of the farmers have that, are coming out of the cars right at that curve there, and there isn't really another place to park.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We've actually had, I think, 3 people, as they're driving down that informal kind of dirt track that's been made, accidentally back up into the drainage ditches over the course of the summer because they don't want to park on the side of the road or don't know if they're allowed to do that.
And is the Conservation Commission aware of those drainage ditches, or were they just mainly concerned about the 100-foot?
No, I bet they know about them.
I have to talk to them more about it because they were just kind of like, oh, you should just move it to their side. And I was like, okay, we can bring back a different plan, do that. And I didn't realize when I had that conversation with them, oh, that actually doesn't measure, the math doesn't add up.
There's like a maze of those drainage.
There's a whole bunch of them throughout the field, mostly cutting down like north-south. And then there's one slightly larger one at the bottom of the field. And that's
This
what
all
that
Corse's
driveway-
whole property?
Yeah,
Yeah,
The part
exactly.
that Kestrel has,
Right.
yeah.
yeah. So there's a lot of drainage ditches.
Well, it seems like the Conservation Commission is your first
That's what I would say too.
your
yeah.
first hurdle. And it doesn't seem to be, if you can work out how you're going to get there, I personally don't see a problem with what you're trying to do.
How we're going to get where?
How you're going to get to the parking area,
Oh, right.
right? Which zone you're going to, circumvent. so to
Right.
speak.
That's good to hear. Are there any other things we should be thinking about from a planning perspective or take into consideration as we work through that piece with the Conservation Commission?
The part I think just traffic and where the best places to get out on that road would be something to consider. But also if the Conservation Commission says you have to put it because of the way the property is, like, I don't know how we would work around that necessarily.
Yeah.
Because it is kind of dangerous, like here, as soon as you get here.
yeah.
it starts to
This
curve.
whole thing, yeah.
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 The whole thing.
There's also a bunch of transformers they recently added to the telephone poles there. I don't know if I'm using the right word because but it's like kind of, I don't know, it feels less welcoming. And I should mention, ultimately, not necessarily the next year, but as we expand, we'd like to be able to put a farm stand there at some point. So we'd want people to be able to pull in and buy vegetables there for that.
Well, then you need to get off that road, off Linseed Road. Yeah,
Right.
yeah. Yeah, Linseed Road is very busy.
Yeah.
But,
This is, like I said, this is also a unique property in that it's agricultural use and recreational use, so.
Yeah, I would say pursue conservation and then probably come back to us.
Okay. And I'm not really familiar with the process. I know I can call the town again and speak with you, Wilma, but is there, a particular, I fill out a form, an
They'll tell you.
RGA. What's
If
that?
they answer though, she's having issues with them answering.
Yeah, well, that was a bad meeting that night, if you'll remember.
That was a pact.
They were racing to get
Yes,
out of there.
yes.
They had, all of them seemed to be tied up with other things. It was just a bad night. I think that they'll be a little less,
Okay.
anxious.
Okay.
And when do
Sure.
they meet?
They meet next Thursday.
Okay.
Did we put you down? I don't think so.
I don't know if we did, and yikes, I should see if I personally am available next Thursday, or if not, maybe I could send a
We
coworker.
probably should, Gabriella.
Okay.
Yeah, because this is different because it's parking for agricultural use.
Which probably is a separate category on its own.
And could I get a couple copies of those too?
Sure, if you want to keep those copies, and I could send, I think I sent them to you digitally, but I can resend them.
Would you? That would be
Yes,
good.
absolutely.
All right. I'd like to have a file started.
Great, well, I'm very glad to hear there's not necessarily any other large hurdles you see at this moment that we should consider on your end.
I don't think so.
Okay.
And we're excited, how did this growing season go?
It went really well. I mean, much better than expected. Everyone who's involved still is working full-time, other jobs. They only really had their one day off a week to go and be able to grow, but they, sold a whole bunch of produce to River Valley Market and were able to grow a variety of, mostly eggplants, peppers, tomatoes. It was a good season. We had
True.
good rain, good sun.
How's that? That's good land there?
Yeah, it's a little wet, but this season it really wasn't as wet as we expected. So
That's why all the drainage is just.
yes, yes, yeah, no,
Yeah,
it went-
Hatfield is very wet.
yeah.
But it was best out of the options you were looking at, you were saying.
Definitely. Yeah, and we didn't have many problems with it all in the way that we expected we would.
Great.
Yes, we just did raised rows.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah,
Well, thanks for coming.
great, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Have a good night.
You too?
Thank you.
So our reorganization, that'll get postponed
Get
to
bumped.
next month.
Then it'll be next year, and then,
Well, I know. We'll get to it at some point.
So in the next meeting, we have to fudge it with the next meeting because of Paul?
Yeah, we have to
Okay.
move that.
Okay.
meaning we're not going to be at the first
December
one.
4, yeah, it doesn't work for Paul. So,
When's he back?
Next day,
I think he said the next day
he did.
in his email. Yeah, and we could go that week if you want to, other than, or you can plan another week.
Well, it doesn't, if we don't have them here, it's kind of tough to figure out.
Yeah, it is.
Well, tell me what's good for you three, if you can agree on a date.
I'm
We'll see
available.
how-
Well, when's he coming back?
He'll be back the next day. He'll be
Be
back
back on the 5th, Thursday the 5th.
We probably have 350th that day.
Yeah, it's probably a bad week after the midweek.
Well, anytime the following week is fine for
Yeah,
me.
that's what I would say, the following week.
All right, what day do you want? Can't have Thursday.
I'm
The
gone
Wednesday.
from the 7th to the 5th day, from the 8th to the 15th. Sorry.
All
Just
right,
realized.
so that
Everyone on their
week is out.
vacation.
Well, let's
The
go
8th
for
to
the
the
third
15th.
week. That's a good week.
Oh, yeah.
What week?
For the holiday.
Oh, heavens, we're into December.
The 18th?
Yeah, how about then,
Let me look at my calendar. What if we just do it the 5th, the day he's back? Oh,
why not?
We could do that. I think he said that he could handle that at the last meeting, that he would be here the next
And
day.
then it gets it out of the way, that first week doesn't mess us up for the rest
Right.
of the month.
Right.
Yeah, but we got 350th.
Oh.
that, we
350th.
vote, we fill out a.
Move around?
Yeah, that isn't set in stone anymore.
Okay.
Let's do
All
the
right.
5th.
Six
Fine.
is
And
Friday.
we're 2
that-
out of 11.
Oh, are we saying the 5th?
Yeah.
That's
All
fine.
three of you are okay?
Well, no, we have parade that month in December, so that, Yeah, no, that's fine, yes.
You're okay?
That's,
Oh, you have
All right,
parade instead?
I'll run it by Bob, and we'll see how he is with it, and confirm it with Paul.
Okay.
Okay. So we'll do reorganization then, we'll do minutes when the two of them are back. And that should do it, folks.
and then we'll review with them everything we did wrong tonight.
What did you say?
Nothing. Okay,
I make a motion, we adjourn this meeting.
yeah,
Second?
all right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, everyone.